Hello and welcome. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. I should also say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. I hope you are well and staying healthy. My name is Mario Giarto, and I am an agricultural officer in the Plant Production and Protection Division at FAO. On behalf of the Secretariat of the Rotterdam Convention, I take great pleasure in welcoming you all to this webinar on strategies to reduce the use of highly hazardous pesticides. The Rotterdam Convention is an international agreement with the aim to protect human health and the environment from certain hazardous chemicals and pesticides. The Convention, through the Prior Informed Consent Procedure, also known as PIC, facilitates the information exchange among parties to the Convention, including on regulatory and management practices that promote the safer use of pesticides. This event has been organized by the Secretariat under the Technical Assistance Program of the Convention. By means of technical assistance, the Secretariat also supports parties in identifying sources of information and facilitates an information sharing process where national governments can access relevant data on the characteristics, uses, and benefits of alternatives to hazardous pesticides, including examples and case studies where alternatives have been applied. It is with all that in mind that today's webinar will focus on knowledge sharing to better understand the advantages of alternatives to highly hazardous pesticides. The webinar also aims at increasing awareness about the importance to capitalize on new opportunities to reduce pesticide risks. Today, we are joined by 4 excellent panelists who will share with us their knowledge and experience working in the field and of the benefits of sustainable agricultural practices. I am certain that you will find their presentations informative and enlightening. Again, thank you very much for your kind attention, and I wish you all a very successful webinar. And now I would like to leave the floor to my colleague, Andrea Lobianco, from the Secretariat of the Rotterdam Convention, who will facilitate the session. Andrea, thank you. The floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Mario, and welcome to everybody. Welcome to this very interesting webinar. Now I'm going to give the floor to the first presenter, who is Dr. Nurmi Panjasti from the International Rice Research Institute in Cambodia, who will make a presentation on integrated pest management in rice. So I give you the floor, Dr. Panjasti. Thank you.
Hello, could you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone participating from different parts of the world. Thank you for making time to join us today, depending on where you are. And I also would like to thank the organizer for inviting me to contribute in this webinar. So my name is Nurmi Pangesti. I'm originally from Indonesia, and I joined IMI this year in the middle of pandemic. And so I would like to share with you our work at IRI and also with collaborators from different organizations regarding the integrated pest management in rice. So the importance of rice. So rice is grown by around 144 million of farm families, which represent 25% of world farmers. So rice also feed 4 billion people, around 56% of world populations. And it is estimated that rice production needs to be increased by 25% by the next 25 years to be able to feed the growing population of the world. In the same time, rice also received about 35% of world total irrigation of water use, and also harvested from 8% of world cropland. And it also uses 25 million tons of fertilizers, which is around 15% of world fertilizers in total. So the challenge of rice cultivation is that it needs to be produced, processed, and marketed in more sustainable way, despite the diminishing resources on land, water, labor, and also energy. So in the process of growing rice, there are many challenges. So pests and diseases are part of the challenges. So on the left side, there are predicted models on how much pests and diseases contributed to the yield loss in rice productions. So it is a model being predicted in South and Southeast Asia by a colleague at IRI. So the darker the color, it means that the loss is higher. So they consider important pests and diseases. Among them are panhopper, stem borer, bacterial blight, and fungal blast. And they found that on average, farmers are estimated to lose 37% of their rice yield to pests and diseases in rice productions. So integrated pest management has been promoted as a way to sustainably control pests, and it is a holistic evaluation of and implementation of pest management strategies in production systems. It doesn't aim to eliminate pests completely, but to manage it in the level that is economically acceptable. So there are many components of integrated pest management. So there are the ecological aspect of it and the societal aspect of it. And the earlier model of IPM, it focused on ecological aspect of pest management. But more and more in the new model of integrated pest management, it emphasized the importance of integrating ecological, economical management as business sustainability aspect to ensure the success of implementation of IPM. So in Southeast Asia, the implementation of IPM facing key challenges, I guess, maybe different in different areas of the world. So in terms of chemical management, the challenges are intensive and insufficient control of pesticides. And the most available pesticides in the market are actually broad spectrum and high risk products. There is no regulation on industrial and consumer chemicals and the rapid expansion of pesticide trade. So on the outreach side, the challenges are lack of sufficient knowledge, awareness, resources, and economic benefit for implementing IPM. And there is an interaction pattern and financial arrangements among farmers, pesticide sellers, and laborers that sustain the intensive use of pesticides. So this is just a visualization of the pesticide use in the world. So the darker colors mean there is more use of pesticides. And we can see that in Southeast Asian countries, for instance, the pesticide use between 1990 to 2017 is from low to middle concentration. And this is more like how we can see the pesticide fluctuates throughout the years, pesticide use, and we see that the peak is between 2002 to 2012, the use of pesticide in Southeast Asian countries, and then it shows a trend to reductions from 2012 onwards until at least the data until 2018. So this is also a visualization of how degraded our soil is in the world. This is data from the 1997. So I guess that it also might change now to the side that it is worsening. So agriculture is one of the contributors of soil degradation, together with land conversion and also industrialization. But we can see that in different parts of the world, the quality of soil is very much degraded. In Southeast Asian countries, there are areas that the soil is very much degraded, or in the middle level of degradation. So we know that biodiversity is key to ecosystem services such as pest management, but it has been neglected in our conventional agricultural system. So monoculture has been a common way of rice growing systems in different parts of the world, mostly also in Southeast Asian countries. And there has been a long effort to reintroduce biodiversity in the rice-based systems. And in this talk, I will share with you some of studies that that explore this strategy in different countries in Southeast Asia. So this strategy is mostly used to control insect herbivores, because it introduces flowering plants that can enhance natural enemies, and it also provides resources like nectar or pollen. It can also suppress rice pests, and at the same time, it also beneficial for farmers because it also might increase their income for selling different products, and also can be used for their daily diet to diversify their diet. So it's also known that introduction of biodiversity, it reduces the chemical input and also increase landscape heterogeneity. So this is a study being done in Thailand, Vietnam, and China over 4 years period. So they introduce nectar producing plants around the rice field, and farmers in different regions were being involved also in deciding which species of plants they want to grow. And then they measure the level of pest infestation, insecticide use, and yield in the rice field. So the first they found that also on the left side is insect pests. It's important pest is called brown plant hoppers, and they found that reductions of these pests was found with the interventions, with adding diversity in the rice field. And they also found the same trend of reductions on the populations of wetback plant hopper, which is also one of the important pests in rice. Another thing that they did was, they calculate how much pesticide is used in the control and intervention treatment, because in the interventions, the instruction was that the manager of the farms, they are as much as possible being asked not to use pesticide, but if the pest level is below acceptable, let's say, they're allowed to use pesticide. And then they found that with the introductions or interventions of biodiversity, the use of insecticides is reduced by 70%, and the overall yield is increased by 5%, and that economically it delivered advantage of 7.5%. So another colleague, they do the same objective, but with different plants and different also elements being considered in the study. So they test the effect of wheat, sesame, okra, and mung bean as ban crops, and they also add fertilizer level in the experiment to see how it affects the pest management. And they also use varietal resistance and also susceptible in the experiments. And this is just the main findings that they found, is that parasitoid and predators of Lepidopteran pests and of rice bug were more abundant in high nitrogen rice plots, where their prey or hosts also had the highest densities. And weedy and sesame okra buns, they provide habitat for a range of natural enemies, including spiders, parasitoids, and predatory bugs. And that varietal resistance and mung bean strips had an additive effect in reducing abundance of the plant hopper Sogatella curcuvera and the leafhopper Nephotetix virescens. So this is another study that was done in Cambodia. So in Cambodia, they have involved also farmers to select plants that they think will be good to grow as a crop plants. And in the experimental design, they did in 2 seasons, comparing 3 treatments. So conventionally farm rice field. So in this treatment, farmers were allowed to use pesticide, but there was no rice crop bans. And then they mention it as an ecological engineered field, or EE field, in which they didn't apply any pesticide, and they grow different species of crops surrounding the field. And the last one is the control rice field, when there is no chemical and there is no plants on the plants. So before the ecological tests on how it affects biodiversity of the arthropods, they did gender-informed survey and band plants. So they involve female and male farmers and they make lists of all crops in the rice field and surrounding their house that they think will be promising as a crop plants. And they come up with this list of plant species from rice, sponge gourd, lemongrass, etc. But of course, there are criteria of what kind of plants that can be grown as a crop plants in the rice-based system. So first, the criteria will be that the species has to be short growing durations, that it needs to be flowers in time with the rice growing period, and that they can grow on the rice plant conditions. And from the list, then the researchers, they selected sponge gourd and chili to be added on the okra and sesame as crop plants. So what I find it is interesting also when they asked farmers during the survey, the farmers state that they don't willing to cultivate plant crops if they have a choice of choosing yes or no. So that's also something, to reflect on for the adoptions, how this approach can be done, for instance, in Cambodia. So one of the things that they also measured during this study is that they measured the cost of productions on different treatments. So in ecological engineering field, control field, and conventional field. And they consider several aspects. One is land preparation, seed cost for rice, seed cost for the crops, labor, fertilizer, pesticide, pest management labor, and harvest. So they found that actually the conventional rice has the highest cost due to labor cost of pesticide and pest management. They also calculate the revenue in these three treatments, and they found that the beneficial cost ratio was similar actually for ecological engineering and control, and then followed by conventional rice. In the same setup, they also they monitor how the introductions of diversity in the rice field would affect the arthropods, and they found that they measured the relative abundance of different functional groups rice field collected in different treatments, and they found that predators and detrivores, they are mostly higher in ecological engineering or E field compared to herbivores or pests, and that they found they were lower. So in here, the detrivores, they are represented in this grayish color. Herbivores in the orange, and the parasitoid in the blue, and this color is from predator.
Normally, you only have 3 minutes left. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So another thing that I want to share with you was it was about pest, but this is not about disease. This is a study that was also done in Cambodia, how beneficial microbe is being used to control rice blast. So they found they used resistant and susceptible varieties, and also a beneficial microbes that is available in the market in Cambodia. It's called Trichoderma harzianum. And they found that the application of Trichoderma harzianum doesn't affect pathogen infection on resistant variety, but it can significantly reduce the pathogen infection on a susceptible variety. But the efficacy is not always consistent. So this is good, but also something to be explored further. So apart from the research, I want also to share with you a success story of adoption of best practices. So this is a national program in Vietnam that is called 1 Must Do and 5 Reduction. It started in 2003. So 1 Must Do means the regards of using certified seed, and 5 reductions with regards to reduce seed, water, fertilizer, and pesticide, and also post-harvest losses. So in parallel with the initiative, establishment of sustainability and certification standard for rice productions were done, and also they developed a system to obtain a price premium for sustainable productions of rice. So this program is very much farmers participatory. So even the farmers, they give inputs on what kind of billboard that they want to see, that they think farmers could relate. So this is also designed by farmers. So, many years after the starting of this initiative, there is a large-scale program that's called Sustainable Agriculture Transformations, also started in Vietnam. This is a program funded by World Bank, and they want to calculate how much of percentage of increase in income after implementation of the sustainable agricultural transformation. So 1 must do and 5 reductions strategies was being incorporated also in this approach. And they found that adoptions of 1 must do 5 reduction, it's actually strengthened the economic status of smallholder farmers. And it provides a strong platform for promoting sustainably produced rice. And actually, after introduction of this program, many people in the cities in Vietnam, they are willing to pay more to consume this sustainable rice. So this is some of the take-home messages that I want you to think about. So first is that diversification of rice-based systems in combination with farmers' choice of crops is a promising solution of insect force management, and it can provide additional income and yield for farmers. And beneficial microbes, it can improve disease resistance of sustainable variety under certain conditions, and more understanding on conditions that increase its efficacy is needed. On the social aspect, it is important, and this is a challenge for implementation of integrated pest management technologies, and that research and outreach are fundamental for implementation of APID technologies in the field. So last but not least, I would like to thank you all for your attention. Thank you.
Many thanks, Dr. Pangesti. Excellent presentation. I invite all participants to insert your question in the Q&A box, which is here on the bottom, and then we will answer them in the Q&A session. Let me introduce to you now the second presenters, which is a couple. We have Dr. Stephanie Williamson from Pesticides Action Network UK, and Mr. Atalu Bilay from Pesticides Action Nexus Ethiopia. They will present phasing out HPP pesticides with example from in smallholder vegetables in Ethiopia Central Rift Valley. So the floor is yours, Stephanie and Atalu. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Let me share my screen. Oops. Okay, can everybody hear me and see that okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay, thank you very much to Andrea, Mario, everyone at the Rotterdam Convention team and FAO for this opportunity for Atalu and myself to share experiences from our joint project in Ethiopia's Central Rift Valley. So I'd like to start with some background. Why we began this project to try out IPM alternatives and to drastically cut, if we could, the levels of highly hazardous pesticides used around Lake Ziway. This is one of the country's most important vegetable growing areas. And Pan Ethiopia and many other stakeholders had long been concerned about very high levels of pesticides applied. You can see some of the references down there. Back in 2015, Pan Ethiopia did a farmer survey. They found that 65% of farmers were reporting symptoms of adverse health effects after spraying. When we started the project in 2018, our baseline survey showed that 20% of farmers and 73% of farm workers were able to recall at least one poisoning incident in the last 12 months, either of themselves, a family member, or a worker. And here you can see a young lad spraying with totally inadequate protection. But people are also concerned about likely risks for consumers eating produce sprayed with a lot of HHPs. And also, a lot of households in that area will use watercourses for their drinking water. Fishing is an important livelihood in the area, and there are also concerns about whether runoff of pesticide is getting into the lake and contaminating fish. And there are also environmental risks, where heavy pesticide use could be impacting what is actually an internationally valuable and biodiverse wetland area. Particular of concern were impacts on beneficial organisms which provide ecosystem services, things like pollinators, predator and parasitic insects which serve as natural enemies of insect pests, and a host of beneficial organisms in the soil, livestock too. So in this table, you can see the insecticide active ingredients documented in use by untrained farmers at the start of the project. And you can see that the majority, those in red, are ones that qualify as HHPs on Pan International's list. And while only 2 of them are in the most acutely toxic category, we know from data from poisoning surveillance work in other countries that several of these feature commonly in occupational and accidental poisonings, things like profenifos, chlorpyrifos, diazinon, etc. Many of you will be familiar with these. And overall, considering fungicides and herbicides as well, so total pesticide use, Zuwai produces 64% of what they're spraying qualify as HHPs. Not only that, they're also applying them at very high frequency, at least 10 times per season, often much more, without any proper protection, without, basing the decisions on observations of what's actually needed in their field. So this was the situation that justified for us the need to support farmers to replace HHPs with an IPM strategy based on trying to maximize natural biological control. So we use this project as an opportunity to trial what we call the food spray method, which brings in more natural enemies. Farmers' friends is what we call them when working with farmers. Now, Pan Ethiopia and partners in Benin had successfully used this method in smallholder cotton. And in Ethiopia, the team have been able to eliminate pesticide use in cotton while increasing yields and income. So would it work in vegetables? This is one of the things that we wanted to find out. But just to give you a little bit of background about the food spray method, there are 3 essential components. First of all, you need to make sure there is habitat in or around the fields to serve as a welcoming home for natural enemies. And in vegetable crops, we've been using borders of the legume alfalfa, which is sown before the crop is transplanted. And you can see in the photo, here are some alfalfa borders growing very nicely around some onion plots. The second component is actually applying the food spray onto the crop foliage. And the odor plume from this attracts predators into the crop where they start searching for insect prey. And thirdly, you've put all this hard work to getting natural enemies into your crop, so you really need to protect them by avoiding as much as possible any use of broad spectrum insecticides which can harm them. You can find a lot more detail about the food spray method at our web pages with the link below. Just to explain a little bit more on the food spray, how you actually put it into practice. We make a first application of the food spray about a week after transplanting the vegetables. so that you can get some natural enemies ready and waiting for when your first pests begin to arrive. But to have effective use of this method, you really need to be monitoring your crop regularly to see if the balance is tipping in favor of the pests. And we use a rule of thumb, which has been based on research trying the method out in cotton, of 1 natural enemy to every 2 pests. If the level of natural enemies falls below that, then you need to consider whether you need to make another food spray. So it's really important to keep an eye on that. But I would like to stress that, you do not have to be an entomologist. We are not expecting anyone to identify insects to family, much less to species level. For farmers, as long as they can recognize the main groups of natural enemies, things like ladybirds or hoverflies or lacewings, they are able to get this method to work for them in their fields. However, we recognize that biological control alone is often not going to be enough, particularly in demanding crops like vegetables. So in the program, we've highlighted several other IPM methods. They're listed here for insect pests on the left-hand side, thinking about things right from land preparation through the season, right to post-harvest. Many of these are cultural methods which help make the field less prone to pest or disease attack, methods that help grow a healthier crop which can be more robust and better able to withstand such attack. And when we need direct extra control, first of all, we would go for neem seed extract. And as a last resort, if you do need to actually apply an insecticide, we've restricted this now to spinosad. Although spinosad is highly toxic to bees, it qualifies as an HPP, it's far less harmful to humans, and to a large extent it's less disruptive on natural enemies than many of the insecticides that the farmers have been using. And also I'd like to point out that many of these methods, good field hygiene, wider plant spacing so you get good air circulation between your plants, what we call sanitary pruning, taking off the older tomato leaves, those that have been mined by tuta or other leaf miners, those also are really important for disease management and can help reduce the amount of fungicides applied, which also have been very high in Zuwai area. So that's some background, and I'd now like to pass to my colleague Atalo, who can tell you about some of the results and the project's achievements. Okay, over to you, Atalo.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. Next slide.
Yep.
Atalo, we cannot see you. Would you mind opening your...
Yeah, I was just... Okay, how about now?
Thank you, perfect.
Yeah, okay, I will just go through some of the results we've got from both the trials and from the extension we've been working with farmers through FFA. So we're trialing the food spray method, comparing with conventional methods, especially on whether the food spray method was able to attract natural enemies into the sprayed vegetable fields or not, with all the modification of the agroecosystem, planting alfalfa around and in between the vegetable crops. So the graphs you see here are timeline graphs of pests and natural enemies from the 2018 trials we've conducted. You see, you can see the pests per meter because that was how we're monitoring the pest and natural enemy numbers. So the green line that you see is the number of pests recorded from the food spray plots, and the black line showed the pests recorded from the neem extract treated plot, and the red one is the conventional plot. So this is a timeline graph showing the pests observed per meter from onion crops, and the one to the right is number of natural enemies, same plots, because during observation insect scouting we record number of pests and natural enemies, because that is where the natural enemy to pest ratio emerges from, because that is how we decide whether to apply food spray or not, depending on the number of pests and natural enemies observed. So this is the timeline graph. You see high number of natural enemies in the food spray plots compared to the red line where the insecticides were treated, and same is true for nearly the same number of pests were observed in the conventional insecticides and in the food spray in the from the graph you see in the left. Next slide, Stephanie.
Yep.
Yeah, this one is the same graph, same timeline graph, but we've also put the arrows where treatment applications were done. The one to the left is pest observing onion crops in 2019. So the red arrow show the conventional treatment, blue arrow show the food spray, and a bit of the orange ones are the yellow ones are the neem treated. So you can see the trend of pests over time. Yeah, it doesn't mean it's only the food spray and or the neem and conventional treatments, because as the vegetation part of the plant grows, number of pests may increase. So you can see the trend of increase over time. And to your right is the natural enemies observed, and you can clearly see the difference in the number of natural enemies observed over time, where you have a high number of natural enemies. And application of food spray and other treatments depends on based on the number of pests and natural enemies recorded, because that has to go to the natural enemy to pest ratio. Next slide. Yeah, so based on that, application of pesticides for farmer practices and from the plots who had from the IPM plots, there was a higher reduction in decrease in spray frequency, decrease in use of HHPs, because application of pesticides and other treatments was based on real observations of whether disease and pests were happening, and it was based on thresholds that we've developed for the use of food spray. So you can see for tomato, baseline was 37 rounds, because the farmers were spraying either on calendar basis or based on agronomic practices, because every time they go into tomato fields they have to spray either fungicide or insecticide. So once the IPM method was introduced, application was based on the observation and what's really happening on the farm, on the crops. Same is true for onion, where you have 18.7 rounds average versus 4.3, showing 77% decrease in spray frequency. So down there is a reduction of the use of HHPs, about 50% decrease in the number of HHP products used, and spray frequency for HHPs was reduced about 75 to 80%. Next slide. Yeah, the IPM versus farmer practice comparisons with farmers was also done. Apart from the formal trials that we've been setting up and following up, the IPM plot was managed by our team. Decision was made by our team based on the observation, the natural enemy to pest ratio, And we have also developed a disease management kind of percentage per our plots, while the farmer practice was managed by the farm owners, where they have to implement their own, usual practices. Next slide. Yeah, so this is natural enemies to pest ratio graphs from IPM tomato plots in one of our IPM trial sites. So you can see the natural enemy to pest ratio timeline graph, and it's you only spray either food spray or other if needed IPM kind of selected pesticides if the ratio is below 0.5. If it is above that, you don't need to spray, but spray application or decision to apply the food spray or other chemicals depends not only on the ratio, but you really need to make observations, and some insects may really force you to apply either chemicals or neem extracts. We don't really jump into spraying chemicals. We use food spray, and next to that is we use neem spray as a backup. And if it is beyond that, then we go to selected pesticide use. Next slide. Next one. Yeah, this is where the treatment comparisons, the IPM versus farmer practices. So you can see for onion and tomato, number of spray frequencies for insecticides, fungicides. For example, if you take onion, food spray was applied 5 times, and neem spray, and then neem bicidin, and it was only when pest incidence was high where we applied spinosad, which is 1 round. But if you see in farmers practice plots, there were 8 rounds of pesticide application, profenofos, spinosad, and lambda cylotrine. If you go down to fungicides, it was only 4 rounds versus 9 rounds in the farmers practice plot, showing 56% reduction in fungicide use. Same for tomatoes. So if you see the IPM plots, it was only after the food spray, and then the next backup spray is the neem. And if there is a high pesticide incidence, then high pest incidence, then you go to spinosad, because that is what spinosad is the chemical we use for IPM friendly insecticide. So for tomato, it was 8 rounds, same chemicals, lambda cylotrine, chloropyrifos, profenofos, and deltamethrin. Fungicide, yeah, we're also using baking soda.
Atalo, sorry, you have to close in 2 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Next slide, Stephanie. Yes, it's coming. Yeah. So this is the final. I think it's the final slide. Economic comparisons between the IPM and the farmers practice plots. So if you go down, you can see the production costs. All the costs, for example, soil fertility, labor cost, inputs, and others were similar, and the only difference was the pest and disease management cost. So you can see the net income differences. Next slide, Stephanie. Yeah, this is the average across all IPM versus farmer practice plots from 2019 to 2021, and you can see the percentage increase in the yield, decrease in pest and disease management costs, and total production cost, and net income as well. Spray frequency, insecticides, in insecticide use. Next slide. Yeah, that's the farmers uptake for IPM practices, because farmers were trained via farmer field schools, and we've had 4 IPM methods grouped. Yeah, we had surveys, and 96% of the trained farmers were found to be adopting at beginners level and 58% at improved IPM adoption levels. There are also considerable decrease in pesticide use by IPM trained farmers. Next slide. Yeah, that's the current work that we are working on, and next steps. We're also trialing on the use of vermicomposting because farmers also use synthetic fertilizers for vegetable production, and we wanted to really reduce their use, their dependence in synthetic fertilizers, and we are trialing on vermicomposting this season. The other work that we are focusing on is supporting farmers so that they can adopt by providing and availing IPM inputs like the food spray, neem seeds, and alfalfa, so that they can fully adopt the IPM methods. The other key aspect is organizing farmers in groups because they have to access the food spray and other inputs so that it can be easier for them than looking for other, external support. And market linkage is something that needs focus and that we are working on. I think that's end of the slide. Next slide, Stephanie. Yeah, back to you.
There you go. Here, thank you, Atalo. And here are some links if you would like to find out more about the food spray method. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stephanie Williamson and Mr. Atalo Belay, for this excellent presentation. To buy time, I would like to invite Dr. Prangesti and then Stephanie Williamson and Atalo to start answering several questions that we are having on the Q&A box for writing so that we can buy time, because otherwise I doubt we can answer all of questions in the Q&A session. And I also invite participants to write questions directly there, not in the chat here. Okay, thank you very much. And now I would like to present the last panelist, who's la señora María Angélica Bonilla, Miss María Angélica Bonilla from the Rainforest Alliance in Costa Rica. She will do a presentation on Rainforest Alliance strategy to progressively reduce the use of highly hazardous pesticides. Thank you very much, and the floor is yours, Maria.
Thank you, Andrea. I will share my screen. Please let me know if you see it and if you hear me well.
Yes, we do. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. So hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. First of all, I would like to thank the FAO and the Rotterdam Convention Secretariat for the invitation. I'm also extremely honored to be presenting on this topic, especially today that we are celebrating the World's Soil Day. Soil health is key not just to agriculture production, but also to climate resilience, and it is no secret that pesticide applications are detrimental to soil life. As Andrea mentioned, I will be sharing a bit our strategy for reducing the use of highly hazardous pesticides. To give you a bit of context on the organization, the Rainforest Alliance is an international NGO working at the intersection of business, agriculture, and forests. We address some of the most pressing social and environmental challenges, including the use of highly hazardous pesticides. We work in 4 main intervention areas. The first one is the certification program. So you have probably seen our green frog seal in the supermarkets. And here we have more than 2.3 million certified farmers complying with our sustainable agriculture standards. We are currently working with more than 100 crops, but our coffee, cocoa, tea, and banana certification programs are among the largest in the world. Another intervention area is landscape management, in which we have long-term conservation and community development programs in important tropical landscapes. We also offer supply chain services for developing customized support to help companies define and achieve their sustainability commitments. And for supporting these interventions, we advocate for advancing far-reaching policies that support farmers. Since the beginning of the organization, particularly the beginning of the certification program, we identified the crucial need to protect people, and nature from the negative impacts of pesticides use. And it was with the very first standard in 1993 that we prohibit the use of chemical products listed by international agreements, including PAN 30,000. Then in 2017, we officially adopted the WHO and the FAO highly hazardous pesticides definition. And with this, we built our prohibited list that by now includes around 160 substances. As you can imagine, this has been quite a journey. So today I would like to share some of the learned lessons, where we are and where we want to go. So regarding highly hazardous pesticides phased out, the first lesson is related to the importance of understanding the context. And this is because sustainable long-term and effective pest control measures are built bottom up. At an individual level, I'm referring to understanding farmers' access to resources, such as knowledge, inputs, labor, and finance. This is crucial to identify gaps, but also to connect potential solutions with the farmers who at the end are the ultimate pesticide users. At a system level, we need to identify the HPPs that are being used. We need to identify for which crops and what are the target pests. This is for understanding not only the magnitude of the challenge, but also because solutions are very crop and pest specific. And at a landscape level, it is key to understand the agricultural policies in terms of registered alternatives, restrictions, prohibitions, subsidies, incentives, etc. Once that we understand the unique features of each context, is that we also understand that there is no silver bullet or fixed solution to phase out HHPs. The strategies will vary depending on the country-specific context and the needs, and will usually combine a range of different options. But something is certain, and is that these strategies cannot be reduced to a merely replacement of an HHP with another chemical. In this slide, I'm listing some of the potential elements that at least we have identified that needs to be considered when thinking in a phase-out strategy. So the first one is integrated pest management, and my other colleagues already talked about the importance of this, but this is one of the most effective and efficient approaches to sustainably manage pests and diseases while reducing the use of pesticides and increasing farmers' resilience. So for sustainable long-term solutions, IPM needs to be at the center of it. And here, when we talk about IPM adoption, capacity building is needed. Research and innovation is also needed for new pest prevention and suppression alternatives. And I'm not referring only to chemical control, but to any other viable pest control method that is safe, economic, practical, effective, and locally available. We have additionally identified a huge need of data for decision-making, data such as the one presented by Nurmi and Atalo. It is extremely important to show farmers data on efficacy, costs, and the trade-offs of phasing out chemicals versus adopting agroecologically based alternatives. This in order to convince them that in the medium and long term, IPM could even be more profitable than chemical control alone. Regulators also have a key role in terms of restricting, prohibiting HHPs, registering less toxic alternatives, and incentivizing farmers to adopt agroecologically based alternatives. It is very unfortunate, for example, to see countries that need to use HHPs because in comparison with other countries, they do not have access to less toxic alternatives, as those are not registered. Regarding access to resources, what if we have everything we need for phasing out an HHP, but it's only at a high level? So for example, in the market level, we have the best biological control or technology for controlling pests. The academia has the best data on effective IPM measures, or at a government level, we have the best policies in paper. It is very important to connect farmers with these solutions by giving them access to knowledge, innovation, and finance. And finally, on consumer awareness, there are many pesticide applications that are done for cosmetic damage. and the environmental and health cost of producing perfect products is just too high. And this type of concern should be an important factor used by consumers when making buying decisions. So considering those lessons, we have been working on and improving our strategy for phasing out HHPs. And as I mentioned before, for us, IPM is at the center of it. And even though we as a society have been talking about IPMs probably since the 70s, we still see that pesticides are misused, overused, and used as a first option. For us, managing pest diseases and weeds needs to be part of a climate-smart and regenerative agriculture approach by strengthening and balancing the functions of the agroecosystem. We want to move from a high reliance on pesticides to a redesign of the agroecosystem when there is a high reliance on natural solutions. And this usually involves the bottom-up and contextualized IPM programs that are science and field-based, focusing on transformation rather than management of an existing system, and facilitating farmers' learning and knowledge exchange. With this, we want to support farmers becoming resilient and more productive while reducing pesticides use. As part of the 2020 certification program, as I mentioned before, we have a prohibited list made of almost 160 substances. And even though the most effective measure for reducing risks is to eliminate the hazard, we have identified some scenarios where no viable alternatives to HHPs are available. And here I'm referring to specific existing threats to plant production systems that cannot be contained by any other reasonable means. And here we have implemented a progressive phase-out approach. Out of those 160 substances, 80% have been completely eliminated. And this means that certified farmers are not allowed to use them at any time. And the remaining 20% are in a progressive phase out via the exceptional use policy. The objective of this policy is to support producers on their journey to phase out this by granting temporary and limited exceptions to a specific crop, pest, and country combination scenarios. I am sharing here some key features of the exceptional use policy. The first one is that paraquat and active ingredients listed in international conventions are not subject to exceptions. So even if we, for example, receive requests for those will be automatically rejected. Exceptions are temporary and limited to a specific crop, pest, and country combination. I already mentioned this, but it is extremely important to highlight that exceptions are only granted when the substance is crucial for production. So in line with the need, the exception is only for a specific crop, pest, and country. Exceptions are also linked to risk mitigation measures and conditions. So the risk mitigation measures, for example, will depend on the toxicity classification of the substance. And additionally, farmers have to report the usage data. And these exceptions are granted for 2 or 3 years maximum. Exception decisions are made based on farmers' needs, and for these, farmers submit exceptional use requests. These requests include information on the crop, the target pests, the active ingredient that they need, and also will include details of their IPM plan. And here is also important to mention that the reception of requests is always open. The final decisions are made considering the local context and availability and viability of alternatives. So these received requests are analyzed by an internal IPM team and an external panel of experts made of scientists and technical experts with experience in sustainable production and global expertise. And finally, this is a dynamic policy, which is updated every 6 months. And this is because, as I mentioned before, we're continuously receiving new requests. All the information on this policy is available online, including the timelines, the procedures, and also the details of the received requests, the final decisions with the respective justification. This is an example of the nematicides exception that we have granted to the banana sector. And this is because the main nematode control tool is the use of organophosphate and carbamate nematicides, classified by the WHO as extremely dangerous and very dangerous. There are few new safer alternatives, but still the WHO 1A and 1B are still needed where there is a high nematode population burden. Because of this, we granted exceptions until June 2024 to banana producers in Costa Rica, Honduras, Guatemala, and Ecuador. And that means that those nematicides cannot be used, for example, for controlling other pests, or those cannot be used in other countries different than the ones listed here. For using these products, farmers also need to fully implement risk mitigation measures, such as the use of PPE, implementing the restricted entry intervals. We also limit the application periods and also request regular medical examination, including cholinesterase testing and many other specific risk mitigation measures. When we changed from the 2017 certification program to the 2020, we also learned that these types of phase-out periods alone are not enough for supporting farmers' transition. So in parallel to this exceptional use policy, we have developed our organizational IPM strategy to further support farmers in their phase-out journey. The main element of the strategy is training and capacity building. I have already highlighted the importance of IPM and capacity building, so I will only briefly mention that here we have two approaches. The first one is related to training specifically designed to assist farmers achieving RA certification. And then the second one is a new initiative for conducting IPM training following the farmer field school methodology. This in order to promote experimentation, demonstration, and exchange of experiences among farmers. Here, there are many opportunities and collaboration is welcome and needed. Another element of the strategy is the IPM Knowledge Bank, where we are consolidating the data from the field, including the information from the exceptional use requests and pesticide usage data. This in order to create a knowledge pool to make informed decisions and support producers better. In tailored solutions, we are co-creating projects with partners for advancing the pesticide reduction objectives. This includes from field experimentation for testing potential alternatives to tailored IPM training programs. And the last one, we are lobbying and advocating for shared responsibility in IPM and pesticide use. So coming back to the nematicides case in banana, we need to address this issue in a cross-sectional manner. We need research and innovation for new, safer alternatives and data. We also need to invest in capacity building, and also we need support from governments to register new alternatives, and the market, for example, need to pay fair prices for supporting this transition. And as this scenario, we have many others involving different substances, different HHPs, and different crops. So before I finish, I will just like to highlight the important role that we all have to play and also the urgency for joint interventions. So we welcome you to reach out in case of comments and questions. I'm also including here some additional material in case that you are interested. So thank you very much for the time and the space.
Thanks a lot, Maria Angelica, for this excellent presentation. We are pretty on time, so now we have 20 minutes session dedicated to answer some questions. I've already seen that most answers have been already answered in the Q&A box. We still have open 6 answers, and I will start with the first one. I'm seeing that to the question of Mr. Solomon Mengistu Atalo is currently answering. So we go to the second one from Joseph Morrell. He's saying, did not want to just look at more rational. Does this mean that there is data that does look at more rational use in combination with other changes in practice? Is not referring to a specific presentation. I think it was related to the presentation of Stephanie.
Yes, I think it was, Andrea. Our concern on this project was to really see if we could move away from pesticide use. That's the DNA of Pesticide Action Network. You wouldn't expect anything else, really. I mean, our experience elsewhere and also in Ethiopia is that if you just go in and try and get farmers to use pesticides a little more rationally, you need to spend pretty much the same level of resources and effort. So why not go further and look at how far you can get with ecologically informed approaches to IPM? So that was the reason that we weren't just interested in tweaking pesticide use, really. And you can see that we so far we've been able to make some really big reductions in levels of pesticide use and spray frequency, which will deliver better results, really, in terms of protecting farmers, farm workers, and the environment than using them, let's say, less hazardously, but still in similar quantities.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. Then we have another one from Subhash Chand. I hope I pronounced it correctly. He's saying he has seen spinosad in the list of HPPs, whereas spinosad is extracted from a fungi and is called botanical pesticides. Stephanie and Atalo, you want to answer to this?
Yes, I can comment on that one. It is still, if you look at the under the PAN International's HHP list, the criterion we use for toxicity, that comes from US EPA data, and spinosad qualifies above the threshold level to be considered as highly toxic to bees. I mean, just because it's derived from a fungus doesn't necessarily mean it's totally safe. However, we do recognise that it is not as damaging to many natural enemies as things like profenifos, pyrethroids, etc.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Stephanie, again. And yeah, I've seen that Maria Heli has also answered. Great job. The panelists has answered during the presentation 18 questions, so I'm very happy. We're pretty on track. We have practically answered all questions. There is an intervention, not a question, from Lucy Ma. She said she would like to share a good practice. Lucy, if you write maybe some more specific details in the Q&A box, then I can give the floor to some panelists and we can start a bit discussing on it. Thank you. Lucy, do you mind writing more details in the Q&A box so that I can give them the word to? Okay, no, well, yeah, she wrote here in the chat, the Hongyi farmland in Shandong province in China adopted the concept of biodiversity conservation in our neighborhoods. There is no chemicals, fertilizers, plastic plant covers, hormone, herbicide, genetically modified seeds. Well done. Thank you. Don't know if Stephanie and Pan UK, I know you have also experiences in Asia, and what Lucy is sharing with us, I think is known to you, know, this kind of concept, beacon, biodiversity conservation in our neighborhoods. And if you want to comment this, you're free. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. We'd love to hear more about how farmers are managing pests and diseases in that farmland. That would be great to know. I mean, I know also in India that there are I think now several million farmers involved in a sustainable agriculture program, which has pretty much been able to phase out use of pesticides. Many of those farmers now are organic, and that's been developed over the last 10-15 years. And at the same time, that's very strongly linked with helping those farmers sell more directly to consumers as well. Consumers who are interested in eating safer produce and you know, making sure that they're sourcing for more sustainable practices. So I think you know, as we found in our project, it's also the marketing side and linking farmers more directly with consumers is just as important in my view as the technical aspects of IPM.
Thank you very much. I don't see I don't see other questions. I've seen a comment from Marcus Yudu. He's answering to Lashan. I would like to give maybe the word either to Dr. Pangesti or to Ms. Bonilla if they want to clarify a question that they answered in writing. Maybe floor is now with you, Maria Angelica, if you want to clarify a question that you answered in writing for all participants to listen to it, and then maybe I will give the floor to Dr. Pangesti. Thank you.
Maybe I just want to add in this case that is being shared in the chat, and these type of farms that implement these practices is what we call front runners. And from our perspective, it's very important to escalate those learned lessons to more farmers. So yeah, very important to identify those and work with them to move those practices and expand the implementation to not only this community, but anyone who can benefit of this. So let me check the questions that I have. I think that one was related to how we make sure that the farmers are implementing the risk mitigation measures. And this is part of our certification program and our assurance system. So we basically work with third-party certification bodies, and they are the one responsible for auditing farms and making sure that they are complying with our standards. So auditors will go to the field and will be checking in all the elements of our standard, including the use of the products listed in the exceptional use policy. As part of our assurance system, we also have room for making pesticide analysis. So that's also a tool that we have.
Thank you very much, Angelica. Dr. Normi Pangesti, do you want to add something? You want to clarify a question that you answered in writing? Thank you.
I think no clarifications for the...
We cannot hear you very well.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Yeah, I don't have clarification for the questions I received. I just want to comment on the statement of Lucima and also on the comment of Stephanie. Yeah, I think it's a very positive move that there is a province in China that moved into more organic. And I have the same question with Stephanie: is how do they manage the pest disease problems? And for instance, in the rice systems, most farmers who grow rice are smallholder farmers. They have limiting capacity in terms of economy and how much they can afford losing yield, for instance, because if we practice completely organic strategy, they might lose yield. So that's something also just a comment, and maybe in different places the move toward organic practices still take time. So, thank you.
Thank you. I've seen here a comment in writing from Gary Bradbury about quality of extension services in some countries. We know that quality can really differ. But if any of the panelists want to comment on this, you're open. Thank you.
Sorry, what was the comment?
The quality of extension is commenting on the fact that quality of extension services in some countries is not high. And we've seen that in some African countries, Asian. So, yeah, of course, that depends also on the level of. I give to you.
Can I make a comment on it?
Sure. Yeah, Talo, go ahead.
One of the challenges we faced when we work with smallholder farmers is, when it comes to agriculture extension, the government offices mainly focus on the promotion of, agrochemical inputs, the use of pesticides, fungicides, and then fertilizers. Whereas if you go to the farm level and ask them which, for example, insecticides or which chemicals are you using for, let's say, tuta, they just tell you that tuta is a worm. They don't even know which part of the plant is affected. So you can clearly see that the farmers don't have understandings on the type of pests and these at least commonly occurring ones. So they only know that they have to spray when disease and pest incidents are there. So they don't know which products for which pest and which disease. So that goes down to the problem of the extension services, especially with the agriculture extension systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matalo, for your comment. I don't see other questions.
May I add something on that
No,
one,
sure,
Andrea, please?
Go ahead.
I think also I'm thinking in Ethiopia, but elsewhere, a lot of certainly the younger generation of extension agents, they're possibly not as pro pesticide as the previous generation, and they will certainly have had some element of IPM theoretical training in their degree or whatever they did. But I think often we've found that they don't have enough confidence in practice, and to be able to support farmers to look at other ways of managing pests really requires quite a lot of confidence. And you get that from field practice and learning by doing and benefiting from being around people who have got a lot of experience in it. But I think our program also showed in Ethiopia that within a couple of seasons, you can really build those skill levels and confidence.
Thank you. The last question we can answer is a question from Clade Mujajo, is of course on the high cost of organic fertilizer and organic pesticides. How can poor farmers afford them? If one of the panelists want to answer, maybe Stephanie again or Atalo. On the high cost of how can a poor farmer afford to buy organic fertilizer and organic pesticides, and what are the alternatives?
Can I go?
Yes, you can. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, I don't know how the statement that organic inputs are costly for smallholder farmers, because they're not buying them, they are producing them. Because they have, if you take, for example, compost preparation for soil fertility, soil health improvement, then they have all the inputs in their backyards and they can use that. So the only thing extension services can work in there is to support farmers so that they can use their own inputs, farmyard manure and so on. Regarding plant protection inputs, they can, for example, they can prepare the food sprays themselves. They can prepare, simple plant extraction methods. They can work on modifying the agroecosystem where they can plant the alfalfa and other trap crops around. So it's only, supporting them technically where they can, build their capacity and develop their skills, especially in knowing the major insects, so that they can, devise ways of controlling them. Otherwise, they are not really high cost inputs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Atalo. So we cannot answer more questions, but I would like to remind you that I would like to encourage you to follow our next webinar, which will be on the 13th of December at 4 p.m. Rome time, on registration of biopesticides, challenges and opportunities. It's very important, it's very interesting. This is a series of webinars that Rotterdam Convention Secretariat has been organizing to facilitate access to information on alternatives. So really, please also attend the next webinar. It will be in English, and interpretation it will be provided for translation to Spanish and French. Okay, so I really thank you all for your active participation. We have reached, I think, over than 130 participants. It's been a great pleasure to have all you here from all continents, Latin America, Africa, Asia with us. I thank you, Dr. Pangasti from International Rights Research Center, for her kind participation and presentation, as well as Dr. Stephanie Williamson, PAN UK, Mr. Atalo Bilei, PAN Ethiopia, and Maria Angelica Bonilla, Rainforest Alliance Costa Rica. So thanks again all. And it has been a pleasure to have you all here. Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good weekend,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.